I would want to be running a business where I have flexibility. And right now I do, especially want that as we, as my wife and I want to, grow into having a family and those things. Like, I don't want to be the absent father. Like, that is not interesting to me. That's not a legacy I care about. And so if I can grow a business that is profitable, that employs people, that is something that I enjoy doing, and it allows me to be flexible with my family, like, that's a win. I would feel really thankful to be a part of that.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Building a Better Business. Today's guest is Davy, owner of the Sunshine Cedar Company. And I said it without stuttering it. Woo, I love it. Zach, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jake. Good to be here.
All right. Alliteration aside, I'm excited to jump into the story about how you started Sunshine Cedar, the genesis behind it. I mean, you've got, just to give the listeners a little bit of background, your background is you came from corporate America. You're behind a desk at a Fortune 100 company, and then you decide, I don't want to say all of a sudden, but it felt pretty abrupt that you decided to leave corporate America and go out on the entrepreneurial journey. Probably over 10 years ago? Is that close to?
Yeah, this will be 9 years ago.
9 years.
Okay. 2016 was when I made the actual plunge, almost exactly 9 years ago.
So. Yeah, and you've had some really cool business adventures. I mean, I can't remember the business that you started off in, but it was sort of like an equipment sharing company, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I remember the slogan, because I remember being so like, wow, that's a great slogan. It was make money on the tools you have and save money on the tools you don't. Did I remember that correctly?
That was like an old version of it.
Oh, that was so good. I loved that.
Yeah, no, well done. That one digs way back there.
Yeah.
The one we went to market with was actually get your lazy assets to work.
That's just as good, if not better.
And, the company at that point was called Twerk. So
Twerks, that's right. Yeah. That was before twerking was a thing. So just to clarify.
We might have just been like riding the wave right as it came out. We're like, hey, we can run with this.
Yeah. Which I love that. That was a great start. You've had your hand in some in a hops business, as sort of like into the brewing world. And now it's Sunshine Cedar. So I'd love to hear more about why Sunshine Cedar, where this opportunity come from, and why, what was the need you were trying to fill?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting journey for me, for sure. When we started the first two businesses, like you said, in the brewing industry and with software, the cedar business was actually kind of came along before that. I just didn't have the means to jump into it. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm more of a backwater dude than I thought I was at first. Went from software to the woods, but so growing up, my family has a farm in northern Nebraska, and it is there's about 600 acres up there that was pasture land that kind of over the last 50 or 60 years sort of got taken over by cedar. And so growing up, it was sort of always this conversation, we should probably do something about that, but it's really expensive to have somebody come in and clear out ground, because traditionally what guys are doing is just coming in and cutting it down, pushing it into a pile and burning it. Mm-hmm. So, it gets pretty expensive though when you're talking about that many acres. And so it just kind of sat on the back burner. And my whole life growing up, it was like, yeah, maybe sometime we'll do something about it. Well, so about 10 years ago, I started kind of looking at it a little bit more seriously, and just thinking about what could be done. And you've got trees now that are 50 or 60 years old at least. And we've actually got a forest here. This isn't just a patch of, bushes. This is a genuine forest. You got 40, 50, 60 foot tall trees. And we've got tens of thousands of acres that are just like ours in this area. Mm-hmm. And all of these landowners are trying to figure out this problem. I found a study back then, it been about 2015 or so, that the Nebraska Forest Service put out that said 38,000 acres a year just in Nebraska alone get overtaken by cedar. Like that's a lot of acres. So it was a problem that's kind of was we had experienced personally, but also was obviously beyond us. And so, yeah, I was like, man, it'd be cool to do something with it. But, I didn't know anything about the industry. And so I went off and tried my hand at other stuff first. And then kind of stumbled back into it in 2019. A guy that I knew through a state agency sent me an email one day and said, "Hey, I've got a guy that came down from Minnesota that really wants to log. And he wants to log out the cedar in this area." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And so I sent him over, and long story short, like, he was totally, he was a treacherous guy. Let's just say it that way. And the more you get into the logging world, the more you like, there's just a lot of shady
Yeah.
like business that goes on. So
Sure.
you got to filter through the trash a little bit. But he came down, and we ended up signing a contract, and they were going to come out and log our property and then pay us a percentage of sales, and we would move on. So that started. He got about a month into it and then basically just abandoned ship. I didn't hear hide nor hair from him after that. The investors that were supposed to fund him were still like interested in the project. And so I kind of stepped in and said, well, I'd be interested in kind of maybe taking this over. So we got started, and it's probably, you need a lot more than 45 minutes to get into all the shenanigans. Let's just say it involved a former billionaire from Minnesota that after the fact I found out was an investor that also had spent 8 years in federal prison.
Holy moly.
And it was like, wow, how in the world did we get into this mess?
Yeah.
But so that sort of got me into it. And then early 2020, we ended up actually doing a demo and getting some equipment on site and kind of testing the waters a little bit. It's like, I think we can do this. So, so anyway, that was kind of the genesis of the company. Was more or less stumbled into it and realized there was a pretty good problem there, and seemed like maybe we could find a solution.
Yeah. Okay. So that brings up two questions for me. One, on the supply side, with that many acres of cedar taking over property, is there ever a risk of, I mean, I'm sure there's always a risk, but what's the risk of running out of supply? Does it regenerate fast enough that you can keep there's always continuous supply? And then two, we didn't talk about like the demand, like, okay, just because you have a problem doesn't mean there's a market for it. So how did you go out and test that there actually was a need for the type of wood you guys would be harvesting?
Yeah, you bet. So as far as the supply side, when we approached it initially, our goal was to do a thinning process. So you'd go through an acre, in every acre, you might have, in a really dense acre, maybe you have 60 or 70 trees that are going to meet the specification for what you can use to harvest and log. And then, if you got maybe 200 or 300 trees an acre of cedar, then maybe you're going to just cut out some of the small junk that's not useful and it's branchy and it's not going to grow straight and whatever else. You thin that out, take that all down, and that just gets disposed of. And then you would leave, the other probably 30 to 40% of those trees. You would strip up the branches 10 feet off the ground so that grass can grow underneath it. And then you just have these trees now that, because you have thinned them down and now they're not fighting as hard for sunlight, but they've already established themselves, you will see year over year, the speed of growth will triple or quadruple in that same amount of time. So you might look at a growth ring 10 years from now, and if you cut that tree down, you can tell, 10 years ago, it just went from 1/8 of an inch to 3/4 of an inch in growth that year around that tree because it's thinned out. So that's one way we approached it. Was you can, if you do it right, and this is how logging works around the country. You go up to Wisconsin, there's more acres of trees today than there was 100 years ago.
Wow.
Because they've grown it out, they thin it, they don't overforest.
Yeah. That's
so
smart.
It's like, okay, we could do this and make it a regenerative process.
Yeah.
But then also we weren't that big, and there's like one other legit logging company in the state. So it's like nobody else is doing it, and we're not even coming close to keeping up with it. because it's too expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, for a landowner, you're looking at $1,000 to $2,000 an acre to clear that stuff out in heavy growth cedar. And
Hmm.
if our average property size we worked on was probably 150 to 200 acres.
Okay.
So the average guy is going to have to put in a
Yeah.
lot of money
Yeah.
just to get back to a blank slate.
Yeah.
you know so that's from the supply side. We were like, that's going to be a long-term problem. If we run out of it, then that's probably a good time to exit.
Yeah. Right.
And this is not just even in Nebraska. This is in Oklahoma and Texas and South Dakota and Kansas. And so it's a widespread problem here in the Midwest. So it's
Yeah.
like, we're not going to run out of cedar anytime soon.
Yeah.
So that from the supply side. Demand side, when we first did a demo we had a company come down, and we did a couple acres where they came in, because we didn't even know how well the modern machines would work with cedar. Cedar's
Hmm.
so limby and
Yeah.
branchy, and it's like, man, is it even gonna work? So we brought it in, and off that we got probably a semi load of logs that came out, and I was like, well, might as well see if we can sell these. And
Hmm.
so I took probably two or three trailer loads to a local Amish sawmill, and I had them saw it up for us. And then I just kind of started calling around. I put a listing up on Facebook, and these were mostly just like fence posts, like
Yeah.
4x4
Yeah.
fence posts, cedar fence posts. And so I got a call within 2 days of putting them up there. Somebody was like, "Hey, I'll buy those off you." And I was like, "Okay."
The whole
And
lot?
then, yeah, what'd you say?
The whole amount, like everything you had harvested?
Yeah, they wanted
Wow.
they wanted everything I had up there. And I was like,
Wow.
"Okay, that's cool." And then I just started kind of calling around, because I was getting these random people calling, asking about it, and uh, they were trying to talk me down on price, but I was like, I wonder where they're going with it. So long story short, I ended up connecting with a supplier or a buyer down in Missouri, and they were doing a ton of export.
Mm.
And so they would actually uh, ship it all the way overseas to China and Vietnam and wherever else to take that, to get it processed and probably brought back and resold to the American market. But
Yeah.
so I connected with them, and they were, like, we'll buy as much as you can bring us.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, there was that. And then there was also, if you've ever gone to Walmart or Menards and bought cedar chips that you use for like animal bedding and stuff.
Hmm.
Well, there's pretty much one company that does almost all of that for those: Tractor Supply, Baumgart, all those groups. And they had a plant actually in Nebraska.
Oh, nice.
And
Okay.
so they would take all the kind of cedar logs that we were not good enough to mill, and they weren't straight enough to use
Hmm.
for fencing. And they just would put it through a shaver,
Yeah.
shave it down, and bag it and sell it to those places. So, and they had a decent supply line. I didn't love working with them over the long haul, just because their volume fluctuated so much. So they'd
Sure.
come at you, "Hey, we'll buy 500 tons a month for the next 9 months," and then they'd shut off the tap for another 9 months. And so you
Yeah.
you didn't really know what you were going to get. So it
Yeah.
was kind of just like a
Unpredictable.
cherry on top.
Yeah. Before we move on, I wanted to ask. So when you're working with these, let's call them farms, or families that own the farms that have this problem of growth of the cedar, are you? Is the problem so bad that they're willing to let you come and harvest for free, or are you having to pay to, or are they paying you to come and take care of it? Like, what's that look like?
Good question. So when we started, I'd also kind of coordinated with the Forest Service here in Nebraska. So I'd go to a landowner, and honestly, after the first landowner, I never actually had to reach out, because I was getting more requests than I could handle. But
Great
what
problem
I
to have.
what I did is I said, "Hey, if you can do this grant with the Forest Service, you pay me the grant money to clear it, and then if you give me the rights to the lumber, I won't charge you the additional amount that you owe to pay for that work to get done, and I'll just waive that cost." And so I basically went to the landowner saying, we can rid you of this problem for free. Which,
Yeah.
on the first one we worked on, the guy had 500 acres. We told him we'd be able to tackle probably 100 of that. And so, I mean, he was looking at 150 to $200,000 of money to do that, and we could come in and say, "Hey, for no charge, we'll take that." And he was like, "Great, I don't have to
Yeah.
mess with it.
All day.
Take it." So that's how we approached it getting started. Once I got a couple years in, for a lot of reasons, we ended up stopping doing the grant work.
Mm.
It just got more complicated, and we ran into numerous situations where the goalposts kept getting moved on us. And every time we'd finish a project, oh, you got to do this and you got to do this. And it ended up
Yeah.
being like, this isn't working. It's
Yeah.
just more complicated. So
But
we just went directly.
but essentially you get paid by the landowner to clear it, and then you get to keep it and resell the lumber you cleared, right?
Yeah.
That's a pretty darn good model.
It worked out pretty good. Yeah, it worked out pretty good. And my goal though was to I didn't want to make my money off of clearing, because there's
Yeah.
a lot of guys out there that's how they make their money.
Yeah.
They go out and they've got skid steers and stuff like that. They'll go and just knock the trees down, grind it up, and
Yeah.
they'll charge the money for it. My goal was to say, I want to make the cedar product valuable enough that I can go in and take it, and not have to charge the landlord.
Yeah.
Because that was the incentive, is they want to save money.
Yeah.
Nebraska doesn't have enough of a logging industry for them to charge somebody to come and take their stand of timber.
Yep.
So that was like, if I can go in and save them money doing it, that's going to be a huge leg up for me.
Yeah. I love that. Well, as every business owner knows, every successful business owner knows, there's always these catalysts, let's call it catalysts, in your business, that like moments in time where the the trajectory of your business just shifted, right? It was going pretty steady growth, and then maybe did one of these. Is there any that come to mind for you and for Sunshine Cedar, that maybe a decision you made or a problem you solved or a conversation you had that led to exponential growth for your business?
It's a good question. I feel like I'm still, we're 4.5 years into it, and it still feels like you're trying to figure out stuff
Sure.
all the time. It's interesting that when I think about maybe a catalytic moment, actually wasn't so much on some spiking upwards, but like a kind of a massive business model change that came out of hardship. Where we're running, there's very few people available to work.
Yeah.
I mean, the closest town has 250 people in it, and
Slim
most of those,
pickings.
there's not. Let's just say there's not an operational high school
Yeah.
in the town, and so there's just not a lot of young people available. Anybody that's already got a job, that's available, is either retired or probably not qualified to work for anybody, because there's just so much work that could be done, and everybody's trying to find help. So we got to a spot where I'd probably hired, over the course of the first 2.5 years, gone through a dozen different operators, and only two of them were the original two guys that I hired were actually very good. And everybody else, it's just hard machinery to run.
Yeah.
And, you guys that ran tractors their whole lives, like, I can't do this. And so,
Yeah.
you kind of, for whatever reason. So fast forward, we get to 2023, and my main operator ends up going back to work for his dad's ranch. They're going to expand out their ranch. And so I'm kind of in a spot where I'm like, the other guys I have on hand aren't able to run the actual harvesting operation very well. And so I kind of got to a spot where I was like, I think I might need to sell. Like, I don't really know. I live in Omaha. I'm not going to go, be up there all the time and running this. I can't find the help I need. It seemed like maybe a transitional point. And then, so that happened basically 2 years ago this month. And then about a month later, we ended up getting a great contract with our buyer down in Missouri. And basically they really needed to ramp up how much cedar they were getting in. And so it was like, if you can get us this cedar, we'll take as much as you can bring us. I'll guarantee you we'll buy this much from you at this price.
Yeah.
I was like, geez, okay. So then I spent basically the next 2.5, 3 months finding every logging or tree related business in the state, and just started trying to track down all those guys and incentivize them, and started doing more brokering,
Mm.
where I was just buying logs from them. And then we would kind of pass them on down to our bulk buyers down south. So that was one big thing. And then as a result of all that, um, it's funny now, and this isn't directly related to your question, but when I started the business, I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know how to
Right.
run that kind of equipment. I didn't know
Yeah.
anything about a diesel engine, whatever. I
Yeah. You're trying to
couldn't.
learn how to run a business and how like to actually operate machinery too.
Yes, no clue, no clue. So I'm trying to figure out everything all at once. And so in 2023, though, I listed my equipment for sale, and those are not cheap machines. And we listed in February of 23, and the market goes dead.
Mm.
Like literally, I'd sold other equipment on there, fine. And my brokers, oh, that'll sell next week because that's a fantastic machine. It's going to be high demand. Crickets. So I was like, oh my gosh. So that goes on, it carries on, and we're 5, 6 months in, and nothing's moving. And so it's like, well, like the brokering stuff was going pretty well. But you're sitting on all this equipment that you're just hardly using. And so I was like, you know what? I got to go up there and like, I got to figure this out. We can't just have equipment sitting there doing nothing. So I went up there and ended up starting to run it. And, the upside of that was I think twofold. One, you start to just like get into the world a little bit,
Hmm.
and I realized that I had been shooting from the hip on so many things, and I couldn't actually manage people well because I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah, sure.
And once I got in there and I learned it and I started running it, and I can go cut a semi load of trees a day myself, and like we can do that.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, my understanding of what expectations are was way up. And it was like, okay, that's what it looks like to actually lead from a place of knowledge. And so I think it just gave me a bunch more confidence to kind of pile into stuff. And you realize if you're going to be in this business, it's just hands on. Like,
Yeah.
even if you want to run the business, like you just have to know enough to actually figure stuff out. And so
Yeah.
I learned a lot through that. And so I'd say like, just gaining the expertise on that side has given me so much more confidence looking forward to say, okay, now as we start to retool and move into kind of what I think is the next phase of what we want to do, I know what to expect and
Yeah.
what to ask my guys to do.
Yeah.
So
So that makes me wonder. You've changed the model and the value proposition. It seems like a couple times you kind
yep.
of came at it from different angles. And you just talked about, or you just mentioned that it gives you a vision for what it's going to be going forward. What does that vision look like? Like, what does not only your business look like going forward, but what does the industry look like going forward? Does it give you excitement? Does it give you angst? Like, kind of walk us through what that looks like.
Yeah. So when we started, I saw myself as a logging company. And now I think I see myself as a lumber company.
Okay.
As much
Describe the
as any
difference of that.
Yeah, so the difference being a logging company, you go out and you're in the woods and you're running all the heavy equipment, you're cutting down the trees, you're bringing them out of the woods, you're bringing them to the mills or whoever your buyers are as kind of a rough, unfinished product. And so that's what I was like, hey, we'll do that. We did milling, so we did work with we had an Amish mill that we would work with, and we'd be bringing them 2 or 3 semi loads a week of cedar logs, and they'd mill them up for us, and that's how we would do it. But I was thinking more in terms of bulk.
Mm,
Let's get it out the door. Let's move it. It's high volume game. If you're not cranking out a semi load a day, it's going to be pretty hard to make it work. But I always knew from the first year we started, like it seemed like if we could figure out how to keep a steady supply and then grow the milling side of that business, that was a good opportunity, for a lot of reasons. One, the margin's a lot better there,
hmm.
versus selling as bulk. So if we can hammer and zero in on that, we're gonna definitely be in a better place. So I think that's what I kind of leaned into a lot
Hmm.
more over this last year was if we can start to get into um, making lumber and doing having both a retail presence, working with contractors, working with kind of that circle of people, you can your margins are a lot better. You're not in the woods doing
Hmm.
dangerous work where everything's high risk. Everything is extreme. You never break down in a convenient location.
Yeah,
You
I can
know, like,
imagine.
and where we're working, there I am the closest dealer I can go to that knows anything about this equipment is Wisconsin.
Whew.
So and most of my parts I would actually order out of Washington. And so it's like there's just nobody that can really do it. And so it's just like you kind of take away a lot of the risk, and you get into a side of it that's more profitable. So I think that's kind of one of those pivots that we've made, and I get excited about going forward because I feel like in the building space, whether that's for fences or decks or for cabins or whatever it is, people, I think, really like real things. And, there's been so much prefab manufactured product out there, but you can't replace the smell of cedar.
It's true.
When that's in your house,
Yeah.
like you're going to smell that for 100 years. You can literally go and sand off 100-year-old cedar chest, and immediately that smell comes
Yeah.
back. And all of a sudden you're thinking of grandma and Christmas and everything else. And I think I hear it every time. Every time a customer comes in and they buy, a cedar to put in their house or whatever it is, like I just love the smell.
Yeah.
I literally had a guy this morning that came and he bought more. He's refinished his whole barn and he put it in there with that. And he's like, everybody walks in and that's the first thing they notice.
Yeah.
And so I think that like just a real product. I think people want that. I think people also like a story with it and just
Hmm.
being like I can say, hey, we sourced these logs that I'm cutting for you. This actually came 30 minutes from here. And like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think to be able to have those kinds of things, obviously as you grow and we sell, I mean, I've had people drive down from Alaska to get cedar and from South Carolina and from
Wow.
Missouri and Texas. It's a weird space because there's a lot of cedar millers out there, especially in the South and Southeast, but it's a very poorly marketed space.
Okay.
And so I get calls all the time from people out of state that are either going to drive in or can I ship it to them or whatever. And it's like, sure, you
Yeah.
want to buy it? That's great. We'll do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's just a desire for those kinds of things that people are always going to be building stuff and replacing fences and whatever else. And so to have something with character like that is a cool trademark.
Yeah. Is there opportunity for consolidation? For consolidation, if there is like a poorly marketed, pockets of this throughout the country, is there opportunity to be the sort of parent company of those?
I've talked with probably 4 or 5 mills with that are mostly in Missouri or Arkansas just in the last 2 months that have all been operated by guys that are in their late 60s or 70s. They got no heir apparent,
Yeah.
and they're just like, well, I can't hire anybody. I can't find anybody good.
And I'm not doing
But
it forever.
yeah, and I've just been doing it, so I'm just going to keep doing it until I die, probably.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, at the very least, the market is the providers in the market are gonna start shrinking.
Hmm.
And there's other places where even from a regulatory perspective, it's harder. So 3 years ago, the rules changed with the Forest Service, the U.S. Forest Service in the Black Hills, and they went from 29 mills to 12 in one
Hmm.
year because all of a sudden all that changed. There's not a shortage of timber, and there's not a shortage of people that are buying it,
Hmm.
but they just changed the laws. And so that's regional and site to site. But I think there is a lot of opportunity. And what I've found, even with what we're doing with cedar, is you can go and buy cedar in Missouri or in Arkansas or where, and like there's a lot of it down there. Um, and there's a lot of it around here too, but people are willing to pay for it just because it's local.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a little bit of an arbitrage opportunity where it's like you
Hmm.
just get a little bit outside of the sphere of where that's common.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you get, oh, yeah, this is great. This is great. It's a novel product and people are really excited to buy it. So I think even being able to do that, I've talked with guys up in Montana that are logging huge spruce and pine up there that I'm like, hey, we could bring that down here. And all of a sudden now you can sell 60-foot beams that
Mm.
I don't have access to. Our trees aren't big enough for
Yeah.
that, but they're getting it and they're getting 25 cents a board foot for it. And it's like, oh, geez, that's like scrap here.
Hmm.
And so if we can bring it here and now we have a different, unique building product that is not available,
Yeah.
kind of opens up some doors. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff like that I get excited about and thinking about what we could do.
Yeah. Well, on the flip side of that coin, what concerns you about your industry and maybe even your business particularly? Like, what headwinds do you have coming?
I mean, I think we're probably prone to all of the normal headwinds in terms of just general economic factors. So if
Hmm.
people are doing well generally, and they're going to have more disposable income, like that's probably going to be better for us. If things get really tight, like most of the time, if people are price sensitive, they're not going to go buy a more
Yeah.
premium product, and so that's always a concern. I don't know that that's necessarily specific to me. Um, I don't foresee, especially just working in the state of Nebraska right now in terms of logging and that, there's not going to be a lot of regulatory issues or things like that just because there's not much regulation on cedar. It's a weed. People literally see it as a weed that needs to be removed. And so,
Hmm.
I'm not worried about those kinds of things. And to be honest with you, I feel like the last the first few years of the business were like those where you felt like you were standing on the edge of a cliff with a wind blowing at your back.
Yeah.
And you just kind of get to the spot where you're like, there's always something I can worry about.
Hmm.
Uh, and I can't control those things. I
Yeah.
literally can't. And I've missed a lot of sleep on nights trying to. And so I think as much as anything, it's like when you've danced on the brink for long enough, you start to become a little bit immune to it. So
Sure. Yeah. Once you realize that there's always something to worry about, you start not worrying nearly as much.
yeah,
It's a waste of
absolutely.
time.
Absolutely. So, I mean, yeah, there's always things that can go wrong. There's more things that can go wrong that can go right,
Yeah.
but that's okay. Like you
That's
just like
business though,
that's
honestly.
that's what we do. That's the world we live in. And uh, there's that song, "Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow
Just
Up to
grow
Be
up to be
Cowboys."
cowboys.
And
Yeah.
I've always thought, "Don't let your babies grow up to be loggers," because it's a terrible idea. But
Yeah.
but once you get into it and get it in your blood, it's pretty hard to not want to do it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I like to ask entrepreneurs at all stages in their business is what's the long term goal for the business, but then how does that fit into your personal goals, right? You and your wife, like most people start a business to either meet an immediate need or a long term need. So again,
Yeah.
what's the goal for Sunshine? But then how does that fit into your personal goals?
It's a good question. I think this probably has morphed so much over the last 8 or 9 years as I've like grown and tried to learn along the way and found out I think the longer you do it, the more you realize how much you don't know. But I think personally, like things have shifted for me. It's where it's like I don't necessarily have the desire to be sitting on a huge multi-million dollar business with 100 employees. And it's like
Yeah.
that really doesn't excite me. um I really like working in the industry I'm in. I
Hmm.
like and so it's like if I can do that, and I would like to grow it. Certainly I'd like to grow it and to see more opportunity and bring in more people, because I think there is. um but that I think the objectives have certainly changed, and it's like I want to do something that I enjoy doing. I feel like I've finally gotten to something that I like to do.
Hmm.
And And I think my hope probably over this next year and over the next 5 years would be to grow that with people that I like doing it with.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know, because that's as much a part of the journey as whatever you're doing is who you're doing it
Hmm.
with. And so I think trying to be able to do that more, and I think there's some cool opportunities with that that'll open up over this next year. But I've even seen how much that's changed for me in the last 6 months, and it's just like, okay, man, you find these people that you get to work with consistently, be that customers or
Yeah.
vendors or, people that are doing the work with you. That's what it's about. So I think I get excited about that part of it. And then, I would want to be running a business where I have flexibility.
Hmm.
And right now I do.
Yeah.
And I especially want that as as my wife and I want to, grow into having a family and those things. Like, I don't want to be the absent father. Like, that is not interesting to me.
Hmm.
That's not a legacy I care about. And
Yeah.
so if I can grow a business that is, that's profitable, that employs people, that is something that I enjoy doing, and it allows me to be flexible with my family, like, that's a win.
Yeah.
And I would feel really thankful to be a part of that.
Yeah. I love that. As we wrap up, I had a guy I used to work with. Well, I was a client of his, but
Okay.
he very successful guy. And I don't know how we got to what we were talking about or how we got to this topic, but he made this comment that just stuck with me. It's one of those things you hear and you're like, man, I don't
Mhm.
know, like the impact of that. I probably don't even realize how much, the magnitude of it.
Yeah.
And he had said that he's addicted to freedom. And I'm
Hmm.
like, that's such an odd statement, but it's like it has so much power to it. And I didn't really realize the magnitude of that until starting, my own businesses and
Yeah.
seeing the freedom. There's a lot you give up and there's a lot of sleepless nights and money
Yep.
you give up and all this stuff
Right.
to make your business successful. But man, once you taste the freedom that comes with being an entrepreneur, and working with people you love to work with and working with customers that are amazing and in an industry that you really enjoy, it's all worth everything you've had to go through to get that. And so that, to your
Yep.
point, flexibility, we're really talking about freedom, and the freedom that comes from being an entrepreneur is second to none. Anybody who takes a crack at it, I say, do everything you can to stay in it because there's no better life than entrepreneurial
Well, then
journey.
it ruins you trying to go back.
Oh, there's no going
There's
back.
been several times over the last
No,
8 or 9 years where I've thought, like, I've had offers for things that I'm like, I just don't know how to even do that
it's
anymore.
not
I would
possible.
rather be poor and miserable,
Yeah,
miserable in one way and be free.
yeah, 100%. I
So,
cannot agree with you more on that. Well, Zach, if people want to get a hold of you, if they want to get a hold of Sunshine Cedar, how do they do that?
yep. You can go to the website, sunshinecedarco.com. We're on Facebook, Sunshine Cedar Co. Yeah, so we're pretty easy to find there. We just got onto Instagram.
Nice.
We'll see if I can keep that going, but we've
I
got
love
we've
it.
got something up there too. So yeah, reach out to us. We'd love to. We do all kinds of custom milling, custom sawing. So if there's anything you need, let us know.
Will do. Love it, Zach. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
This is awesome. Yeah, thanks, Jake.